Hello and welcome to Minerals, Rocks, and Fossil Talks. I'm your geology teacher, Jen, and it's Throwback Thursday. This is James Hutton, a Scottish geologist from the 18th century who is also credited as the father of modern geology. His work has influenced so many people, including Nicholas Steno, who I talked about last week. So if you missed last week's Throwback Thursday, go check out that video and learn about Nicholas Steno. But he modeled his work after the work of James Hutton. So let's find out exactly what it was that James Hutton did. He used to go around walking around Scotland, around his home, and he became fascinated with the rocks in the area. So he developed many theories, but it was a long time before he ever shared any of those ideas because he was, quote, one of those who are much more delighted with the contemplation of truth than with the praise of having discovered it. End quote. So, let's take a peek at his work. The first idea he came up with was that the land that we stand on is complex and not the original material. So, for example, the mountain below, that is part of Highlight Canyon in the Gallatin Range outside of Bozeman, Montana. Those rocks are limestone, and limestone is created at the bottom of oceans. It seems a little weird that it's at the top of a mountain peak, but if we think about the fact that our land is complex, not the original material, and that there are other processes involved, it starts to make more sense. And he picked up on these ideas in Scotland. The second idea he came up with was that if the land that we stand on is not the original material, then there must have been different lands and seas that existed before the ones that we currently have, and that they operated the same way. So rocks would still erode and break down and be deposited in basins, and that there were still ocean currents that still worked the same way. They may not have gone the same directions because the continents were in different places. And he never really suggested that the continents moved, but kind of suggested that the continents moved before Wegener ever came up with his continental drift. He was saying these are not the same. They were not the same place. They were not the same shapes. Those kinds of things. Third, he said that while present-day land was forming at the bottom of the sea, animals must have lived on the previous lands much like today. So if there was dry land, maybe even things in the seas, because he would have seen a lot of ocean rocks in Scotland, probably found some ocean-based fossils, it's likely that living things lived in the same kinds of environments that they do today, even though things were changing. And then finally, he said, in order to make the land that we are standing on a permanent fixture, two things needed to happen. A, loose sediments needed to consolidate into a rock. And this diagram shows you basically how that works. Basically, your sediment erodes and then deposits in layers. Compaction will eventually put enough pressure on there and cement it together to make a rock. Simple enough. And then B, elevation of those consolidated masses or rocks must rise above sea level. Therefore, we need to have uplift or mountain building to get it up where it becomes dry land. So he had all of these ideas. He didn't necessarily have a mechanism yet. That would come later. Someone else would figure that out. But these are like the basic ideas of how geology works. So he was onto something. I hope you learned something new about geology today and the history of the science. And I hope you tune in tomorrow to learn about the most prominent and prolific organisms of the Ordovician seas. And I will fossilize you later.